Awesome. So I don't have a clicker, so I'm gonna just hide behind my laptop here. Um, I'm not gonna be talking about. Actually, I'm gonna talk about the same thing, but with a easier title to search later on. So multi-platform Dart. And this talk is a little high level because I built this for dev fests, and generally people there don't quite know what Flutter is just yet. So what we're gonna do is that I'm gonna run through the slides quickly, and then you can ask some questions to make it more interesting afterwards and like dig really deep. And for those that don't know me, like I've been doing Android for 5 years. I'm also a TDE for Dart and Flutter. I did some web, iOS, all stuff. And you probably know my blog, or might know my blog, which is called Flutter Rocks, but now it's just iirokrankka.com. And I've been using Flutter for 18 months now. And this is a story about scratching my own itch. So I love going to the movies, and I used to live right next to a Finkino cinema. And for those that don't know what Finkino basically is, it's the largest cinema chain in Finland. They basically have a monopoly over that because they're so big. And the thing is that I'm usually on my phone when I check out movies or times. And the mobile experience on the official apps are not that good. And that's putting it really nicely. So these are basically stuck in the dark edges of Holo or ice cream sandwich or whatever that design was called. And yeah, well, it's slow to use, doesn't look that good. It basically takes 5 seconds to get to this screen right here and find the movie that you want to watch. And I thought that there has to be a better way of seeing movies on the go or movies sometimes. So I found out that Finkino has this amazing XML API, and it's nothing fancy like JSON, but it works. And I thought that since I'm an engineer, let's make it better. But before actually making the app, you have to come up with a good name for the app. And I actually struggled with this like multiple hours. And the thing is that I cannot use Finkino in the name, but I still have to kind of imply that it's made for Finkino theaters. And this was really hard. So I had a couple like really weird and stupid names, and this was the best one, I think. So is that Pinkino would come with the ugly pink theme, and you just have to buy a pro version to get something that looks good. But then I went, yeah, actually, I was able to build it this far with native Android, but then I got busy with some other projects that I didn't finish. So then I had amazing idea that let's call it Inkino. And I'm really proud of this name, actually. And it took me some time to build it. Actually, it took me like 3 years and 6 projects that I didn't finish to do it with native Android. And this is my problem with hybrid projects. So I basically have something like 80 private repositories on GitHub, and 20 of them are public. And the rest of them are projects that just like started over again and never finished. What's happening here? Okay, so this is basically the story. I don't know what it was with native Android, but I just gave up after a while, and I never finished that project. But then I heard about this guy over here. Woo! And I read the website, so they were saying that Flutter is a new mobile app SDK, and rest of that was basically blah 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 for me, because I've seen this one before, and I've been doing native apps for 5 years before this, so I wasn't really convinced about this. So I was like, yeah, right, seen this. But then I thought that I've done worse things on Saturday night while being drunk, so I just gave it a try, and I actually liked it. I actually quite liked it. And here's a shout out to Simon and his amazing like smooth rotation app. And actually this part was telling about what is Flutter, what is Dart, and everything like that. But since I figured that you guys already know, so we're just gonna skip it right here. But if somebody is watching this video, go to YouTube, check out A New Hope by Eugenio Marletti and Sebastiano Bocchi. That's the video that got me started with Flutter. But anyway, back to Inikino. Now that I knew about Flutter, I decided to give it a try, and I was able to make it better. And this looks, to me, this looks much better than the original one. And this actually works fast because I was able to do some neat stuff with it. And a guy helped me with the design, so I didn't do the design, but anyway. And that's the initial version, which you didn't see right here. It took me something like 2 or 3 weeks to do in a 2 months time frame, because I was working at the same time and this was not my full-time job. It's single code base, all Dart and Flutter. You probably know this, like hot reload is awesome. UI just works. Yeah, well, Flutter is awesome, but it still doesn't cure my unfinished hobby projects. I actually did one incomplete Inikino project, and it's from 1 year ago. So, yeah. And that was like, okay, that's cool, but does Inikino run on web? And it doesn't. Flutter doesn't like go to the web just yet, at least. But I think that if you're actually a business and you don't have a web app, you're giving up on some users, at least one user, or maybe 100 users, or I don't know how many users, but I would say that you're still giving up on a lot of users if you don't have a web app. So now that you already have like some kind of Flutter app built with Dart, can you use that for web? And it turns out that you can, and it's actually quite awesome. It has been around for, my maths is not working, but from 2011. And it turns out that JS support for that is quite good. Like there was literally no struggles in that. And Dart also has web frameworks, such as Angular Dart and over React. I decided to go with Angular Dart because Google uses that for AdWords, which is basically a money-making project for them. They get a lot of money, so it makes sense that they also maintain that Angular Dart library. And after a few moments and few beers, I was able to build the web version for Inikino as well. So here's the movie listing, what movies are currently playing. Then we have Showtime's page, which I use for seeing that what movies I should go to and when they are actually showing them. And this is the movie details page. Oh, okay, well, why not? Let's have a demonstration right here. So, let's actually look at the Android and iOS apps first. So, it's in debug mode, so we will skip some frames here, but that's fine. So basically, it seems really basic stuff, and it's basically is, but yeah, does the job. Same for web, but this is actually adaptive for desktop as well. So you can use it on desktop. You can switch theaters. You can show times. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Finkina API. There's some errors there. And this is also responsive, so it works in a mobile phone as well. Let's go back to slides right now. So when you have a web app, it's accessible. Like you can just share the link and the users can start using it right away. And since it's a progressive web app, which is like a hype word nowadays, you can also install that to your home screen if you want. And that's supposed to drive more engagement to your app, so the users use your app more and more often. It uses service workers in web, so it works offline, kind of, and it's fast. Like, I was actually having some suspicion about using Angular Dart and Redux together, and I was like, is this gonna be performant? Because Angular sounds so slow, or at least that's what my friends were telling, that they hate Dart and they hate Angular, and you're basically having the worst of both worlds when you use Dart and Angular together. But I was actually get pretty good results from Lighthouse with this. Yeah, it's the 2% that I need to get. But wait, there's more. So one thing that I didn't tell you right now was that between those two apps, the web app and the Flutter app, there's 40% of shared code. And if you're wondering, this is a custom tool that I built, and the code looks ugly, but it works. And for me, this is quite awesome, that you can actually share business logic so much between web and mobile. And I think this is the best of both worlds. So if you build native apps and you also build a web app, did I actually put volume up or something? Something happened. Well, anyway, I think this is best of both worlds. If you're able to do native apps, Android and iOS, and then a web app, you're having best of both worlds. And you might wonder, like, that's really cool, but how did you do it? And here's some tips that I have, and they're still high level, but you can ask questions later. So this is basically all about architecture, layering, and decoupling stuff. Step one is to use a common language. In this case, it's Dart. And step two, or one, is to strongly decouple logic from the UI. And here's an example. So this is bad. Don't do this. Like, you have business logic and UI in the same, they are like directly using each other, and they are in the same, they are like really tangled together, and they are hard to split. So if you have a web app which has this kind of stuff going on, and then you introduce a mobile app, you'll end up implementing same logic for web and mobile. But this is good. Separate the business logic from the UI. UI should be really lean and dumb as possible, and it just asks the business logic what to do. And let's say this is your web app. Now, when everything is nicely decoupled, when you introduce a mobile app, it will look like this. And this is much better. You just only have dumb UI and business logic. Well, not really, but something like that. So always decouple things. The business logic layer should be platform independent. There shouldn't be any Flutter dependencies or web dependencies. It should be just pure Dart. And this makes testing the business logic really easy because you don't need the framework, or you don't need to set up a browser to run those tests. Repeating myself. And yeah, this is a good practice, even though you're not even planning on doing code sharing between web and mobile at all. Just do it. And also, you have to pick some kind of architecture to do it. You can roll your own, but I would suggest to use something that is commonly used. And key things to look for: you don't import Flutter, no web dependencies either. And I would say 2 good options right now are Redux or blocks, either one of them. Scoped model is gonna. I saw some kind of issue about this in GitHub, that Brian is proposing for scoped model that they will split things up so that it's not so dependent on Flutter. But currently, you cannot use that for this kind of thing just now. And one rule also, third rule, is that if you have n supported platforms, you have n+1 Dart project. And this basically means that if you support Flutter and web, you have 3 projects. One is core, which is a Dart package, which only has your business logic. And then you have your mobile project, which is Flutter. You import and interact with core. And then you have web project which made with Dart, and it also does the same thing. So it imports core and interacts with it. And here's a stupid illustration, but it drives the point home. So this is a mobile and web project without code sharing, but here's the same with code sharing. So the UI, the mobile app and web app is mostly UI, but of course in a real world scenario, you will have something else than just the UI, but this is basically the idea here. What can be shared in the core project? So you will have localization stuff, any Dart logic without Flutter or web dependencies, and tests for that logic, HTTP communication, JSON or XML parsing, and something that we are gonna talk more on later. I feel like I'm repeating myself right here. I just ported these slides from a GDG template to this, so anyway. Okay, so I did it with Redux, and here's a couple tips or things that I did and how that was possible. For example, if you notice the code, the theater list in my 30-second demo, we have that guy on left, which is for web, but the same thing exists on mobile as well. And what goes there? So, for example, to do that, we need to load the list of theaters from the XML API. We also need to pass them to a list of theater objects to easily consume them type safely. We need to put them into the Redux store state. We also need to persist current theater selection locally, so that if I live in Helsinki, I don't want to reselect Helsinki every time I open the app. That should be like, that persisted for me. And the common logic also has to like load the persisted theater selection when I open the app. Awesome. And this is how it looks on web. So I didn't show you the logic for that because it's really long. There's a lot of things that I'm doing there. But this is how you render the theater list on web. And you also select a theater. So let's go over this stuff right here. So basically you have a theater list component in Angular. And in the constructor, this is pretty nice part of Angular Dart. So if in the constructors you say that you need a store, which is a Redux store, it will just automatically provide that for you. You need to register a provider and set that up, but it's I think this part of Angular is awesome. But anyway, you expose getter for theaters in your component, which basically selects the theaters from the Redux store. And in that way, you can use that in your template, which is basically enhanced HTML. So you can just loop through the theaters, show them in the UI right here. And when the user clicks on the theater in the list, you will dispatch an action that user selected another theater. And then a bunch of stuff will happen. We'll persist the theater selection locally and all that. And this is how it looks with Flutter. So basically we have a stateless widget that connects to the Redux store. And it does a similar thing like the Angular Dart component right there. So it takes in the store and returns whatever we need from the store. In this case, a list of theaters. And every time those theaters change, the builder function gets called with a list of new theaters. And then you can basically render a list view with those theaters. So I mentioned about storing something locally here. And the thing is that we need, okay, still repeating myself, but okay, we need to do key value storage for web, Android, and iOS. But the thing is, different platforms have different solutions for storing key value pairs. So for example, Android has shared preferences. iOS has NS user defaults, and web has local storage. And the thing is, there's 3 platforms and 3 different solutions, and we basically want to share the logic for storing key values pairs, but we cannot import shared preferences or local storage or NS user defaults in the common module or the core module, because that would violate the rule that I mentioned. So this is kind of weird. Like, how do you store key value pairs if you cannot import any of those APIs? Even Dr. Phil is confused right here. So the solution is to invert your dependencies or inject. I'm not sure about the correct term for this. But basically, in your core project, you define this abstract class, which you call key value store. It only has getString and setString methods, and it doesn't actually do anything. It's just like a contract for doing something. So, okay, getString, setString, simple. And for the web implementation, in the web project, you import that abstract class, and you basically create a web implementation of that. So in this case, you have a web key value store that implements the abstract class, and then it's like dispatches, or what's the word for that, like forwards the actions. So when we want to get the string, we call window.local storage and look up a key that we need. And similarly for the setString method, we do a similar thing. And for the Flutter, it looks kind of similar. And in Flutter, we have this shared preference plugin, which is basically abstracting key value store on Android and iOS, so we don't have to do that manually. And same thing here. So we have a Flutter key value store that implements key value store. When we want to get string, we say shared preferences get string, and when we want to set the string, we set string on the shared preferences. And here's an example how that would look. And this is, yet again, like really really simple example. But let's say this right here is our shared common business logic, really advanced, I know. But here the thing is that it takes in a key value store, and it doesn't know which kind of key value store. As long as the class is implementing the key value store contract, we are fine here. And then we just like store the string that we want to store there. So this is a Flutter example how to use that. So yet again, we get instance of shared preferences. This is a Flutter plugin for storing key value pairs. And then we create the Flutter key value store and provide it those shared preferences. And then we create instance of my logic or my business logic and provide it the Flutter key value store. But it doesn't know that it's Flutter key value store. It only knows that it's some key value store. It doesn't care. And finally, we can just call myLogic.setSelectedTheater without myLogic actually knowing anything about which key value store it's using. I actually created packets for this. It's available in pub, so you don't have to do that yourself. I feel like something is missing right here. Well, anyway, conclusions. Start decoupling UI and business logic early on. It's a best practice anyway. Even though you're not planning on code sharing, just do it. Pick a multi-platform architecture and stick with it. And keep the UIs like as dumb and lean as possible. And try to shove as much logic to the core module when you can. And this guy, he did the designs, so I just love this guy. Otherwise, it would be looking really ugly. The web part, I mean. And I guess this is time for, thanks for having me here.